I forgot to mention before, we've got a hashtag for the event, which is hashtag IIEM25. So if you're posting on social media, please do use the hashtag so you can find it. So hashtag IIEM25. You may have noticed on your badges, you all gave us a favourite species. That has no purpose whatsoever other than to give you a talking point. So hopefully you're all asking each other what your favourite species are and asking why you put that. Mine's emperor dragonfly, so please do ask me about that. It's all to do with my pond at home and the greatest recording of the emergence of emperor dragonfly on the island ever. Quite proud of that. If anyone's leaving early, which you're quite free to do, please do make sure you hand your badges in. We're trying to be as sustainable as possible. We will reuse these, so please do hand them in to an MWT member of staff on the way up when you go. Obviously, if you're staying for tomorrow and Friday, you're welcome to keep hold of them until then. The weather tomorrow is not looking fantastic for the excursions, but I keep telling everyone, you're all scientists, you're all conservationists, you're hardy people, you've got waterproofs, you don't care. The only one that looks like it might be cancelled is the boat trip for obvious reasons. We will confirm that later on, let you know what you're doing instead. But otherwise, assume they're going ahead, bring all your stuff, with that in mind. That's why we've given you dry sacks. You can put your phone in there. Nothing will get wet, you'll be fine. Yeah, indoors one, probably popular now. Government House this evening, instead of minibuses doing a relay, we're going to have one coach which has 46 seats, leaving at 6:15 to go up to Government House. As I say, it's quite a pleasant walk. If it's like this, I'd definitely walk it if I didn't need to move my car up there. But there are 46 places on the coach. Please make sure you're there by 6:15. I think the coach will be out front here. But also, if you don't get on the coach and you really need a lift, then speak to one of the MWT staff because we'll all be heading up in cars as well. I think that's it. So that leaves it for me to welcome our second session chair. The second session is Restoring Natural Habitats, and I'm very pleased to welcome Sam Lompier, excellent, who is marine scientist for the Government of Jersey. Sam.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to send a thanks to the Isle of Man team for getting us all here and organised. It's no easy feat getting these meetings put together. It means I'm going to test that from last year. And you've done an excellent job. You've also one-upped us with your book bags. So that's really good. I've got my bracelet on. You can see all the people wearing them. I'd like to introduce the session. These are the sort of sessions, restoring nature, that really give me the motivation to keep going, hearing the good news stories about people coming together and turning the tide on nature degradation or biodiversity loss. So without further ado, Sarah Hickey is going to talk to us about peatland restoration.
Okay, so I've got to try and work out how to use slides, so bear with me. So yeah, just thought I'd give you a little overview on what we've been doing peatland restoration-wise on the Isle of Man. At the moment, we're focusing on upland peat areas. There are lowland peat areas on the Isle of Man, some of them quite extensive, such as the Blackbrookes, but we're currently just looking on the upland areas. And the habitats we have on our hills are sort of a mosaic of blanket bog, peat and upland flush habitat. However, many of these have degraded over time and resemble acid grassland, even if they're on fairly deep peat. So the causes of degradation, it's not a particularly great picture in this light, but you can see here some large peat hags that have eroded right down to the mineral layer. They're sort of about 1.5 meters. And these are formed largely as a result of peat cutting for fuel in the past. So there's lots of areas on the island where fuel, some of them in sort of recognised public turbaries and other ones just wherever people fancy going to cut it on the hill. And we've had drainage in the past, again, for agricultural improvement, for grazing, and also to divert water for mining as well. So they've left quite extensive big drains. You can see this one down at the bottom here is sort of almost head height. Yeah, you don't want to kind of come across that and fall in it. But all these kind of past practices have left areas of eroding peat and drying out peat as well. So what we've done is I work for the Department of Environment, Food and Agriculture on the Isle of Man the Isle of Man government. But we've set up the Manx Peat Partnership, which is sort of a collaboration group between other government departments, public bodies and NGOs. And the idea is that we meet up once a year to discuss updates on the project, and also I meet with different relevant stakeholders as and when we need to discuss things. So one of the people we've been working with closely is the Isle of Man Flock Masters, who are tenant farmers on a lot of the sites that we're with. So the work started quite a number of years ago, actually while I was working for Manx Wildlife Trust, and we started working on finding out where our upland peat was. We didn't have any real data on where our peat was and how extensive it was and how deep it is. So we started off by getting a peat probe and measuring the depth. And the white outline you can see there shows the upland survey area that we identified, so unenclosed upland areas. And we've been slowly colouring in the map. The darker the brown colour, the deeper the peat. We then worked with a GIS analyst in government to develop a peat survey app. So that really massively helped us with data collection. And we have had a range of volunteers and other surveyors going out helping us to collect the data. The peat survey app, as well as collecting peat depths, also records erosion features. So we can map the erosion features from aerial photography, and then we fill in the details on the ground. So we ground truth it, add features that we've missed, take away ones that don't really exist, and then include all the data behind those as well. And this is really important to decide. We've used all of this data to work out where we would like to do restoration work. So we're focusing on areas that have deep peat and also a lot of erosion features. And up till now, these are the survey areas we've seen, the restoration areas we've been working on, which is approximately 420 hectares. And we've got a new site that we're starting on in the next week, hopefully. Most of these are in one catchment into the Sulby Reservoir, which is one of the sources of drinking water on the island. The smaller site up there goes into the Lapsui catchment. So it's just sort of a different river catchment, one that has been prone to flooding in the past, so we've been considering that as well in our restoration work. Right, this is the tricky bit to see whether I can get the video to work. So I'm just going to run through a few of the techniques that we use for restoration. Where we've got a lot of peat hags, which is where peat's been cut in the past, we need to reprofile them using a digger so that the bare faces of peat can be revegetated. And I'll just show you, hopefully, this little video of the digger doing the work. So he's pushing back the vegetation, pulls down the peat so it's at a gentler angle. That's really quick. It is real hard. And then he's pulling the vegetation, stretching it back over the peat, so it can revegetate and reduce the erosion. And that's that. Very fast, very good work. So like I say, one of our major things is to reprofile a large number of peat hags. They start off looking a bit like this. You can see there's lots of peat crumbling away from it, eroding into the watercourses and losing carbon, loss of peatland vegetation as well. The digger comes in, reprofiles it, and stretches out the vegetation as best it can. But there's invariably some areas where there's bare peat, maybe the hag's too big, not enough vegetation nearby. And we cover that bare peat with heather brash and this geotextile, which is a byproduct of coconut. It's called coir. So we cover it with the netting. And sometimes if there's water flow, protect the basic oil as well. And then over time, it's been really great to see, even after just a year, you can see the vegetation coming through the netting, lots of sphagnum growing through there, and over a couple of years, the netting will completely disappear and hopefully be completely revegetated and forming peat again. So the other kind of erosion feature we're having to deal with is areas of bare peat. There's not loads of them on the island, we do have some. And you can see it gets dried out, it gets washed by the weather and the wind, and it's really hard to revegetate naturally. So first thing we need to do is put some heather from local hills, get it baled into heather bales. We get some hardy volunteers to carry them up the hill. And then we're spreading heather brash on the areas of bare peat, and that protects the peat from the weather and creates a nice little microclimate for the vegetation to be able to get established. We cover that heather with coir netting again, just to hold it in place, because a lot of our hills are pretty wet and windy. And there you can see some nice wet sphagnum growing through the coir netting as well. The coir is also really good. It is a growing medium, so it's really good at getting vegetation established, and it keeps it wet, so it holds onto the water even after the rain stops, so it keeps the peat nice and damp. Drainage ditches have been a little bit of an issue on the island, because a lot of the techniques that have been used in the UK to block drainage ditches depend on having quite a deep area of peat below the base of the drainage ditch for it to work. So what we find that most of our drainage ditches have eroded down to the mineral layer, so those techniques won't work. So what we've been using is a technique that's fairly new from peatland restoration, which is zipper and wave damming. And the idea is you have a drainage ditch in a line, and you zip it up by pulling the excavator pulls different bits of peat in from the sides, like doing a zip up. Obviously, that would still potentially become a watercourse. So every intervals, depending on how steep it is, they'll put in little dams, and those dams either divert the water down the hillside or create little pools along the channel as well. So we've been trying that on a few of our big drainage ditches. On some of our smaller ditches, we've just been trialling plastic dams to raise the water table. So one of the problems with drainage ditches in peat is it causes the surrounding peat to dry out and lose its vegetation, and it's emitting carbon, losing its peat-forming vegetation. It probably just have lots of grass. So what we've been doing is putting these dams in, and it just raises the level of the water table a little bit, and hopefully that will encourage sphagnum mosses, which are our peat-forming mosses, to thrive. And you can see that's looking at our one and only mountain, it's named Bell, and that ditch is now nicely filled with water and, yeah, raising the water level. The other type of thing we do is using coir logs as bunds. So we use them to protect reprofiled peat hags where they're required, but also to slow the flow of water. So they're not completely waterproof. They do allow water to filter through, but they trap the sediment and slow the flow of water and create nice little temporary pools on the hillside. We've been doing quite a lot of that. We've been using them on some of our more exposed sites to create sheltered areas. So some of the bare peat areas on the exposed hillsides have really struggled to have the vegetation established because there's just the winds blowing over them all the time. So we've put these logs in, coir logs, to create a bit of shelter. So this is a site, it's one of our small sites in the Lapsey catchment. There is a drainage ditch through the site, and there's a footpath that runs along the stone wall through the middle there. But because of the drainage ditch, which was sort of installed maybe sort of 10, 20 years ago, I should explain, a temporary bridge was put across the drainage site leading onto the peatland, so people use the bridge across the peatland, and it caused lots of trampling damage. So to avoid that, we removed the bridge. We've partially blocked the drainage ditch, not completely. It can still flow water, but it's not as fast. And we've installed this boardwalk so that it encourages people to be able to see the peatland and enjoy it and get to the hilltop without crossing the bog. And it's beneficial for people as well because they keep their feet dry, whereas before it was a really wet, boggy walk. So kind of some of the work we've been doing to protect habitats from recreation pollution. As well as actually doing the work, we've really wanted to take the public along with us. So we've done quite a bit of community engagement. We've run a few guided walks. This was one that happened on a really nice day. So if you are on a peatland guided walk tomorrow, it probably won't look like this. You might not see anything, but we have done them on nice days. It does occasionally happen. So we've done guided walks. We also have had groups out volunteering. This was a group from Civil Defence, luckily, because they had all the right equipment on. They volunteered on a summer's day when it was probably like it will be tomorrow, wet, windy and misty, but they all got stuck in and helped with the spreading the heather grass and core netting. We've also had a website, so if anyone is interested in looking a bit more into the work, the address is manxpeat.org. And on our website, we have links to our social media as well. So we do lots of regular updates for people, letting people know what we're doing and why. I should just say, actually, on our website, we have recently added an interactive peat map. So there's a little button on the homepage that you can click on, and you can go and look at all of our sites with our survey data. It has all of our survey points on with the data. It has photographs that you can look at before and after pictures of kind of the work we've been doing as well. So it's a work in progress, but it's a live feed of our data as we collect it, because the survey work is still ongoing. Future plans, just got to quickly whiz through these. So we are lucky we have 5 more years of funding. So previously it was a 2-year funded project. 5 more years of funding, which will help in planning and carrying on with our work. Our next phase is on Snake Fell, so our only mountain. The north face is full of these quite large peat hags. And we're also working to establish upland woodland creation in gully areas that link to existing woodland and are not on peat. And just to sort of let everyone know the reasons we're doing this work. So the aim project is to have peatlands in good condition for multiple reasons. Obviously, you get nice sphagnum like this, but it improves water resilience, so peatlands can store lots of water and release it slowly. Improve raw water quality, so we're reducing the peat that's being lost through erosion, and the sphagnum mosses help filter that water as it enters the watercourses. We aim for reduced flood and wildfire risk, so by keeping the hills wet, we're much less likely to have wildfires, but also the sphagnum moss and the peatland vegetation slow the flow of water through off the hill and reduce that flood risk. And also benefit biodiversity, because peatlands are home to a lot of rare species and particularly important for a number of bird species. And we're aiming for a sustainable level of grazing and recreation on our hills. We don't want to kind of steal them off from people, and we're working as a whole island biosphere. So and obviously we can't forget the sequestering and storing carbon for thousands of years. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Has there been any work towards quantifying economically perhaps the ecosystem service provision?
There was a paper written on ecosystem services and how they trying to quantify it, but I haven't done it. I don't know exactly what they came out with, but I mean it's recognised that there is a economic benefit to a lot of the issues. I mean, for example, improving raw water quality, reducing the cost of water treatment in the reservoirs if we can improve raw water quality, and obviously the reduction in risk of flooding and wildfires, would have a big economic impact. But our project hasn't actually done any of that kind of work.
Just wondering. Oh, I know.
Coir, yeah, it's a coir, yeah.
Does it have any nutrients in when it affects the soil conditions?
No, it's actually really it doesn't add to the nutrient level on the bog. Bog vegetation needs a low nutrient habitat, and the coir doesn't add nutrients to that. There have been trials using other materials because coir is imported, and so obviously there is a bit of a carbon footprint with that. So there have been trials using similar like logs made of sheep's wool and some other materials as well, and they're ongoing trials. But one of the issues was that they probably add nutrients to the bog and will affect.
Now you can hear me.
Yeah.
It was about the plastic.
Yes.
Could you use timber of some sort?
So the plastic dams is a trial, and timber is possible in certain situations, and it is something we're looking at. The plastic are more effective at raising the water table, and the timber tends to be used more as leaky dams that kind of slow the flow of water in flood events. But it is something we're looking at. It does require installation with a digger though, whereas these can be done by hand. So it's not ideal in that it's plastic and we've not used a lot of them, but it's something we're.
That was my question as well about the wood, but also I guess there's a lot being carried out in the UK. So how are you collaborating with those partnerships and organisations in the UK?
Yes, so we regularly engage online. I attended the IIEM25 program conference last year and made lots of contacts through that. And it's just really been really useful actually. We had one particular site that I was worried about restoration work on because it's previously had a peat landslip. And obviously we don't want to put a digger on and do work that may cause further damage. So I was able to speak with a guy who wrote the risk assessment for peat landslips, and he was very reassuring on what you should do. So it's really nice as the community and peatland restoration is very open to sharing ideas.
I think we're at time for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have David Bellamy. I'm going to talk about restoring Manx as well.
Morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the Isle of Man. As you heard, my name is David Bellamy. I'm Head of Conservation and Land at Manx Wildlife Trust. And today, I guess as our primary sponsors, our primary hosts of this event, I kind of want to set a scene to you about Manx Wildlife Trust as an ENGO, but also some of the work that we do here on the Isle of Man and how this has been transformed, because we're very much an organisation in flux, as you'll come to hear. And I think it's fair to say that our organisation has been completely transformed in really just the last 5 years or so, and largely through collaboration with others, of course, today's topic. Manx Wildlife Trust is 52 years old. We celebrated our half a century just a couple of years ago. And we were founded here on the island in March 1973, effectively because there was a conservation void. I'm sure everyone's aware now, if you're not from the island, that we're not part of the United Kingdom, we were never part of the European Union, and we're not a UK overseas territory. So therefore, for many, many reasons, lots of other larger NGOs have no presence here, for example, the RSPB or the Marine Conservation Society, and we are unable to apply for large pots of funding, especially things like the Darwin Fund and the Life Plus funds. And therefore, there was a complete dearth of conservation activity until the 1970s. But we came from fighting foundations. You'll see in the background here a beautiful photo of a sand dune system, which is the Ayers National Nature Reserve in the north of the island. And in 1973, there were plans to create an oil refinery on that site. And therefore, Manx Wildlife Trust was established to fight this. One of our founder members is in the room today. 50 years later, still volunteering with us one day a week and more. And now today, that landscape is preserved, it's cherished, it's our only national nature reserve on the Isle of Man. It's a candidate Ramsar site, it's an important bird area. It's currently being evaluated for an important invertebrate area status of global significance. And I'm sure when we get around to it, we'll find it's probably an important plant area and an important fungi area. And it's one of those really special places where when you go there, whatever taxa group you're interested in or none, you will find amazing wonders at that site. So we were founded for that purpose, and we achieved that purpose very quickly. And then Manx Wildlife Trust set down the very traditional conservation route of the latter part of the last century, which was buying little sites that our budget allowed us to do, and conserving them in a very traditional sense, which usually involved putting a fence around them and either doing nothing at all or doing very prescriptive management. And through little resource, we ended up with quite a large but a very haphazard network of nature reserves. There are some very, very small sites, and I'll explain some of those in a minute. And there are some sites where I think, if we are brutally honest, we look back at them and think, well, why on earth do we own that site? And what are we trying to achieve there? Or how did we get to where we are today? However, despite a bit of a haphazard background, today we are the largest environmental NGO on the island. We're a membership organisation, and we've got 1,300 members, which is quite impressive on an island of only 84,000 people. And I don't think we've really understood or realised our political clout on the island. And I imagine if we were able to see all of the figures of all the other different membership organisations on the island, whether they're ENGOs or trade unions or whatever, I don't think there'll be any other organisation on the Isle of Man that's got that many members. However, despite an impressive half-century of work on the island, the legacies of losses has unfortunately continued. And in many ways, this is because we've been focused for the vast majority of our history on preserving these very small sites, often with a botanical focus. And we are very good at that. Plants don't really move in a short human timescale in many ways. So we are able to buy and manage a meadow, for example, and look after and increase the diversity there. But it becomes really tricky when we're looking at species that need an entire landscape, which is demonstrated by the yellowhammer here, you'll see behind me. This is a bird I've sadly only seen once on the Isle of Man, and certainly that was a bird that is lost. And within my lifetime, this is a species that has gone from being very abundant to extinct on the island. And I'll start with a depressing list, I'm afraid, and do excuse me for looking at my phone, but it's a list so long that I do need a list. These are the lost bird species from the Isle of Man within the last century. Corn bunting, gannet, a little bit longer than a century ago, nightjar, kingfisher, and these are breeding birds. Sandwich tern, common tern, twite, grey partridge, common sandpiper, redstart, yellowhammer, red kite, again a little bit longer, white-tailed eagle, windchap, corncrake, redwing, lapwing, quail, dipper, ring ouzel, tree pipit, and of course the great auk, the only bird species which we've lost from the Isle of Man, which we've also lost from the planet. And I often say with the great auk, that goes to show that what we do on a local level is important, because if the Isle of Man had taken a decision 300-400 years ago, we were going to preserve the great auk, there's a possibility that through our actions on this tiny little island, that species could still exist to this day. So we heard from Laura before with her collection of dead things, her dungeon of death. In Laura's collections, all the vertebrates either look very alarmed because of dodgy Victorian taxidermy, or they all look like dead little soldiers in drawers like this. But I often bring this photo up because if you want to see a yellowhammer today on the Isle of Man, the only place you can go to see a yellowhammer is in one of Laura's many drawers of death in the museum. And just to demonstrate how recent this is, the two charts on the left is number of reports of yellowhammer received and the number of individuals below them since the turn of this century. And you can see how rapidly a species that was so common on the Isle of Man has disappeared. And from that, we have learnt that nature conservation in the traditional sense is not enough. But we need to transition as an organisation, a movement, an island and a nation towards nature recovery. So it's not to say that nature conservation is wrong, but it's never going to be enough. We need to still maintain our conservation efforts while also looking at recovery. And sometimes that's really difficult because within a human time frame, we don't really know what we've lost, and it's really hard to imagine what the Isle of Man might have been like a few centuries ago, and the levels of abundance we've completely forgotten about. I mentioned the perils of independence in many ways, of being a small island, lack of money, lack of other larger charities. However, it does also give us flexibility in that We only have 24 members of parliament here on the Isle of Man, so there's fewer people we need to influence. We only have effectively one government department dealing in all aspects of the natural world, whereas in England, for example, you might be dealing with 20 or more different government departments and quite goes. So our 50th anniversary just 2 years ago was a big turning point for us as we looked to transition towards nature recovery at a landscape scale. So this is where we were for our 50th anniversary, and this is a satellite image of our smallest nature reserve, which is called Ballamore Meadow, part of a wider area of fen meadows in the very flat agricultural north of the Isle of Man, and it's less than an acre in size. Now, it doesn't mean it's not important, and in this tiny little field corner, 106 different species of vascular plants have been recorded, which is a fifth of all of the plants species known to the Isle of Man exist in this little tiny area. So it's a very, very important spot. However, as I mentioned before, we can conserve plants on that level, but we cannot conserve birds and bats and other more mobile species. So earlier this year, we were very pleased to announce the purchase of our largest nature reserve, the Glen Alden estate in the north of the Isle of Man, which is 1,124 acres. And I mention this for a variety of reasons because it emphasises that we're moving to landscape scale. It's also a very degraded landscape. It's a completely artificial landscape of bracken-clad hills, heather-clad moorlands, and in many places artificial plantations. However, we couldn't have done this without collaboration. As I mentioned, a small island of 84,000 people, there's only so many people we can go to and ask for funds. Public funds are almost non-existent here on the island. However, this was enabled through our wonderful relationship with the Central Wildlife Trust team. Many representatives are here today. And that's a really interesting construct of the family of 46 wildlife trusts. There is one, the Royal Society of Wildlife Trusts, that exists only to support the other wildlife trusts. And this is an incredible resource that we've only it's taken us 51 years to realise what an incredible resource that is. I believe there's over 120 staff or so based out of Newark, all across the UK, who exist only to help us in our various missions for the other 25. And through that relationship, we have brought in a huge amount of funds from off-island into the Isle of Man. So not only did that allow us to purchase Glen Alden, and we're talking millions of pounds for a purchase like this, but it's now very well funded out to 2075 to restore this artificial and degraded landscape into a nature-rich landscape. And that's being fully funded by Aviva as part of their environment, social and governance drive. So I think it's fair to say that Manx Wildlife Trust failed in many ways for saying we're different. We're on a small island nation. Others can't help us. But actually, when we look beyond the seas, we see that there's untapped resources available to us. So if anyone isn't engaging, if you're from a wildlife trust and you're not engaging with the Central Wildlife Trust, I would thoroughly encourage you to do so. And I might add that this is just one of 3 sites that we've currently bought under the Temperate Rainforest Restoration initiative, and we're hoping to announce another site in the coming weeks. So today, with the purchase of Glen Alden, we now own 2% of the Isle of Man, which we'll manage and cherish in perpetuity, both for Manx Nation and for all the different species that are found here. But we will never own enough of the Isle of Man to bring that landscape scale recovery. So therefore, we have to work with others. And of course, there is no sector more important to work with in a land management point of view than with farmers. Because as you can see here, farmland covers 70% of the Isle of Man. Interestingly enough, there's 343 agricultural businesses on the Isle of Man, and when you weigh that against a population of 84,000 people, that means 70% of our land is controlled by 0.4% of the Isle of Man population. Now, whether or not people agree with that from an ethical point of view, what's really interesting is that actually means we have to influence very, very few people in order to have landscape scale changes. So that actually means that is a doable thing, even with limited resources. But of course, still on the Isle of Man, we face an issue where public subsidies in many ways drive nature loss or continue to sustain low levels of diversity and abundance. We heard before from Jersey, but of course 87% of the Isle of Man is not an island. It is our territorial seas, which extend to 12 nautical miles from the shore. And the Isle of Man is a complete trailblazer in sustainable fisheries. We still, our main fishing industry on the Isle of Man is heavily based on destructive fishing techniques. However, we now have a network of 10 incredible marine nature reserves, in which of 9 of them, all mobile gear is prohibited, and in one of those, it's heavily controlled. And while we're far, far from a perfect situation at sea, this reflects that actually working with the fishing industry rather than against them can achieve incremental change, and there's more to achieve there. So I'll finish with a nice case study. So I think I've probably depressed you with that long list of extinct species showing how much work we've got to do. But I guess in terms of a quick summary before I go on to that case study, we're working busy at land at sea, working heavily with others. So while we do see our nature reserves as being the keystone of our work, we've got to work with others, of course. We've got to break down barriers. And I think we have been guilty of blaming government for all our problems and expecting government to fix everything. And we know in a democracy how difficult that is, especially on a small island of limited resources. So actually, rather than just trying to fight government, what can we do ourselves? And we've actually been limited over the last 50 years in the scale of our own ambition. You can see 32 nature reserves now, over 2,500 acres, and we are now the second largest landowner on the Isle of Man, the largest private landowner with 2%. So that case study I promised, we don't often see graphs that go up in nature conservation, but this is the calf shearwater breeding pairs population on the Calf of Man, owned by Manx National Heritage, managed on their behalf and in partnership by Manx Wildlife Trust. And this didn't cost a lot of money. We simply removed non-native longtails, which are the brown RAT, long story there, here on the Isle of Man. And it probably costs a few tens of thousands of pounds to do that. And if you set the conditions, then you can see this recovery. So thank you very much for your time.
No, I've got one first. Are you feeling positive that maybe some of those bird species might come back now that you're putting the measures in place to make the habitat?
Definitely. While we're still in risk of losing some species, I guess the first most at risk is our tree sparrow. And I'm pleased to see that we've got some funders of our tree sparrow recovery project here in the room today, and we've now employed a member of staff solely focused on our most threatened ground nesting and farmer nesting birds here on the island. I am very positive that we'll bring some of those species back, some by accident. White-tailed eagle will arrive on the Isle of Man very soon, no doubt, because of other conservation work being done by others. But Manx BirdLife having amazing work up at their nature reserve at the Point of Air, which we'll hear about later. Common Tern look like they really, really want to return to the island up there. So a huge amount of work to do. We probably need to focus on not losing those few species that are hanging on by a thread, because it's so much more difficult once they're gone. But absolutely, we'll see some of those coming back.
Anyone else?
I'm Tristan from Max Wildlife Trust. You mentioned that RAT eradication from the Calf of Man led to huge increases in shearwater populations. Is anything being done on an island-wide scale to try and remove them from the whole islands, or is that going to be too costly?
Thank you. Obviously, that graph is pretty impressive. As an incidental outcome, we're also seeing eider numbers have gone from 0 to over 100 breeding pairs, wheatear from 0 to 40 breeding pairs, and water rail, which were lost as a breeding species on the Calf of Man. We've got 2 breeding pairs this year. So we're seeing all across any ground nesting bird on the Calf of Man is doing well, with the exception of some of our seabirds for different reasons. But yeah, the island is a large island, and I think we would struggle to eradicate some invasive species like the longtail on such a large area. It's never been done, as far as I'm aware, globally on that sort of scale. With all invasive species, there's 3 options. There's eradicate if you can, there's manage if you can't eradicate, and there's tolerate if none of the above are feasible. So for some of our issues, management is probably more likely than complete eradication. But because we are an island, especially if we take early action, there are, especially some of the invasive plants, we can completely eradicate those from the Isle of Man. One of the problems is in terms of funding, with all invasive species, the sooner you take action, which is always going to be expensive, you will save money in the long term. So it's sometimes hard to convince the people who hold the purse that spending what might be a lot of money now could be one of the most beneficial cost savings that you'll ever make. And when we look on the Isle of Man now, we're spending millions and millions of pounds tackling Dutch elm disease, which we probably could have completely stopped coming to the Isle of Man in the first place if we'd had that foresight. So it's difficult, but we're keeping alive to what's going on in other islands. But certainly, I don't think anyone's dealt with the Isle of Man, an area of such a size for some of the kind of keystone invasive predators.
Got time for one last question. Sorry.
Gentlemen at the round table here.
Thank you very much. Mike Pinkowski from the UK Overseas Charities Conservation Forum. But many years ago, when I was with the UK's Nature Conservancy Council, we were approached by the late lamented Manx Airlines to help with a conservation project. And first of all, they thought Manx shearwater, but with limited local capacity at that time, we persuaded them instead, so I'm glad you've caught up with that, to work with the Chuff, and we helped out the Manx Chuff project. But also, around that time, we also set up the red kite restoration. Books are available, and I would predict, from looking at the mix of habitats you have here, it won't be long before the red kites find you again. So predictions are dangerous, but there's. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess just on that, in terms of Chuff, we have a third of the combined population of the United Kingdom and the Isle of Man, and we're, I believe, on 0.18% of the combined territory, yet a third of the population. So that is a complete flagship species for us. The Manx Chuff project has just wound up this year, and its final act was to sponsor Manx BirdLife's Chuff census, which the results will be published very, very, very shortly. And they're a species that does appear to be stable on the island. And on the Calf of Man, I mentioned before, this is a Manx shearwater chick, by the way, if anyone is unfamiliar with them. But the calf, we believe, has got the highest density of nesting shearwaters anywhere in Britain and Ireland. So yeah, thank you for the background.
I think we're out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and again, welcome to the Isle of Man.
So the next talk's about seagrass restoration and Solent. We've got Timothy Ferrero.
Hello, thanks for having me. My name is Tim Ferrero. My colleague Ellie Parker is in the room. We often do a double act, but as time is short, you just got me today, I'm afraid. And what I'm going to try and do is actually take you through at breakneck speed a whistle-stop tour of the work we've been doing with seagrass restoration over the last few years. So you're an educated and aware group of people, so I won't spend too long reminding you about spectacular seagrass, the only marine flowering plants. Shallow, sheltered marine habitats around the world, about 70 species around the world. In the Solent, we've got 3 of them: common eelgrass, Ostra marina, the dwarf eelgrass, Nanna's Ostra noltii, and Ruppia, probably Ruppia maritima. Some people think it's not a seagrass, but we go in full growth, full strength seawater. So we're calling it seagrass. Some of the most productive habitats in the world, in the marine environment, fantastically important for biodiversity, for coastal protection, as blue carbon stores, and just fantastic places. So really great for our well-being. We've been part of the mapping efforts of seagrass in the Solent for a number of years, and this is kind of the state of play for seagrass meadows in the Solent and on the Isle of Wight. And we crash straight into the shifting baseline syndrome, because to many people that looks like a lot. But what we know in reality is this is sort of like a fragmented remnant of our seagrass habitat. And if you look at the top, you see Southampton Water and the River Hamwell there. What you see in front of you is Osborne Bay on the Isle of Wight, a really nice seagrass meadow, what they really should look like. But this guy, Butcher, wrote in 1934 that before the outbreak of wasting disease in Southampton Water, eelgrass was formerly very large and abundant from Southampton up the River Hamble to Bursledon. That's a long way. And we know to this day that there isn't a blade of seagrass in that area. So about 100 years ago, the wasting disease decimated our seagrass meadows across the whole North Atlantic. 90% plus of that habitat was lost. Recovery's been incredibly slow, not helped by numerous anthropogenic pressures over the years. If you want an idea of how much seagrass there used to be, from across the water in Holland, these guys standing in the water with scythes are harvesting seagrass. Each one of them could do 130 kilos of seagrass a day, loaded into those boats, taken away, dried, baled. The naturally high silicon levels in seagrass leaves makes them naturally fire retardant. They were used as cavity insulation in buildings. They were used as the core of sea walls and sea defences that you can still see to this day. And in Denmark, they were used to thatch buildings, add a bit every year, 400 years of seagrass on some of these cottages. So we know that was a sustainable resource as well. So we really are dealing with something which has gone from industrial resource to fragmented and protected habitat. That's quite a depressing way to start a talk. Do we have any seeds of hope? Well, if you think about it, what we need to do is obviously protect what we have. Most of the seagrass in the Solent is in fact protected, and restore what we've lost. In terms of protection, our Fisheries and Conservation Authority, the Southern IFCA, has had a bylaw in place since 2013, which has essentially protected our seagrass meadows from things like bottom tow trawling gear, fishing gear. Good news, considering recent decisions on that fishing method. And we've also been involved in another pressure, anchoring and mooring pressure. Our volunteers over the last 4 years have conducted surveys of anchoring and mooring pressures around the Solent. And that wonderful bay, Osborne Bay, is a magnet for recreational boaters. Anchoring in particular is damaging to seagrass meadows. We gathered the data, and as a result, Natural England installed in summer 2024 a voluntary no anchor zone. We've been monitoring that 60% reduction in anchoring in that seagrass meadow over the weekend. So we see, as well as legislation, progress there with bylaws. We see also behaviour change. And we're really keen on educating people and stakeholders like boaters to achieve behaviour change as well. But we thought we'd like to really get involved in this sort of restoration process, because natural recovery seems to have been incredibly slow. And there's a certain amount of urgency with our habitats and species and the state of nature we're in. We wanted to try and see if we could give that a push. So 2021, our first project, the Solent Seagrass Restoration Project, funded by Boscalis Westminster and Fatface initially. A cloud of other supporters have joined us since. And 3 sites. Hampshire coast in Langston Harbour, Farlington there, Chilling on the Hampshire coast as well, and on the Isle of Wight. This is the island thing, Sea View. It is actually our only island site, but it's really important because it's a great meadow there, and it's been our biggest source of seed for restoration. More recently, a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago now, the Endangered Landscapes and Seascape Programme funded the Solent Seascape. I'll try and say it again. The Solent Seascape Project with there's East Head Impact in there. So this is a multi-partnership project restoring seagrass, salt marsh, oyster reef, and seabird habitats, trying to influence the entire Solent seascape. And another 3 sites we've included there. Again, on the Hampshire coast at Chilling and at Calshot. Those 2 sites show what we've been doing. We've been working next to existing seagrass meadows. So actually trying to sort of extend our meadows, working where seagrass already exists. But at the top, you can see the Ham. This is a site where seagrass hasn't been for 100 years, nearly 95 years or so. And so we have this included as our aspirational site for restoration as well. Working with plants, working with biology, there is a natural cycle to seagrass restoration through the year. And if we sort of start top right we can see people out there monitoring the existing meadows. We need to know how our meadows are doing, and importantly, whether they're flowering and whether they're producing seed. Because for restoration, all our meadows are protected. Natural England do not like us digging them up for transplants, for example, which some people do, but seed is a relatively sort of non-intrusive way of doing seagrass restoration. You can see some seagrass seed on the right there in the flowering head, known as spades. And come end of June, July, our volunteers are out on the shore collecting seagrass seed, either on foot, wading there, or even snorkeling, which is a great way to actually see the meadows and appreciate the full habitat close at hand. That material goes to our academic partners at the University of Portsmouth in tanks. Now, as the spades decay, they drop the seed. It's a process known as rotting out. Initially, because the spades float and the seed sinks, we can collect a lot of the seed that way, but eventually it all sort of composts down and we end up with a rather filthy mulch of plant material and seed. So we get our volunteers back into the lab and they pick through all that material. A couple of Fridays ago, another 13,000 seed picked out by our volunteers. It's your left, isn't it? It's my right. Far left, our seed storage system. All the seed we gather goes into very cold water, 3 degrees, and high salinity, 50 instead of 32 to 35. That puts it into dormancy. We can store it over winter, and in the springtime, we're out again with our volunteers where we can actually plant the seed. So that is our natural cycle of events. I've mentioned the volunteer word quite a lot, and we basically couldn't do anything that we do at all without our volunteers. Starting in 2022, we launched our Solent Seagrass Champion Scheme, the fastest volunteer scheme Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust has ever run. Nearly 300 volunteers now, and essentially they are the lifeblood of the work that we do. In fact, this summer, just on seed collection, over 600 volunteer hours donated to our project. It's an extraordinary thing. You don't have to read all of this. We've done a number of deployments over the years on the island at Seaview, in Langston Harbour, Muddy Site, at Cowshot on the Hampshire coast. In total, about 180,000 seed planted. And we've been on a journey with our restoration methods. Initially, we started out using these large Hessian bags, seed pods as they were known. This is what people were using for subtidal seagrass restoration, a muddy, sandy mixture of seed put into a Hessian bag and dropped onto the seabed, and the seagrass grows out through it. We're working more intertidally, so we had to bury our seed pods so they didn't get washed away. They went incredibly black and smelly and anoxic. We tried slimming them down. Our ravioli bags, not much improvement. So now we actually use builders' corking guns and we inject the seed directly into the seabed, dispenser injection seeding. We've grown quite a lot of seedlings. That's our big success. Our methods are working. What we're trying to do is to push on to actually get meadows. We know we've got some issues with water quality in the Solent. We can't do much about that, but we can really try and improve things like our germination success. But we have had some quite nice successes. This is Langston Harbour. You can actually see our injection pattern there. Lovely little growth in Langston Harbour. The zoster is protected as SPA feature for the Brent geese, and when I went back to monitor this again, they'd eaten it all. A case of wildlife behaving badly, I'm afraid. Seagrass restoration is not a done deal. The science is still ongoing as part of our project. We fund MRes students at University in Portsmouth, Bronwyn and Hannah and Emma there, who have worked on sediment carbon, biodiversity, eDNA, and most recently as Uresha there. We're just looking at her paper, just about to submit. She's done some fantastic work on seed germination, looking at different growing mediums, different light levels, even seeing, does the seed colour tell you about what seed are going to germinate the best? So as well as doing the practical work, we're really keen that the science informs us and we also contribute to that science, because seagrass restoration is not easy. So I just want to finish up now with a nice story, really, because if you remember the Hamble, our site where there hasn't been seagrass for some time, last April we hadn't had a great season collecting from the muddy sites that we use for seed for this type of location. But we had about 2,000 seed and we thought, well, what the hell, let's just put some in the Hamble and see what happens. And we put out 2 3x3 metre plots. These are sort of typical test plot size. And you can see himself and Ellie there planting with our guns. Caitlin's down there as well, very muddy, walking on wooden boards strapped to our feet, hard work. I went back there 10 days ago, and the seedlings, we did see some seedlings earlier in the year, but the important thing is, do they survive? And we're now through into late August. There are some really nice looking plants. That's a healthy looking seagrass plant. And what's important is that it's already flowering. These are the flowers here on the spathes at the bottom. Hopefully those plants will start producing seed, and we can say with some confidence that we've grown the first seagrass in the Hamble for nearly 100 years. I'm not allowed to tell you that at the moment. So everyone in this room and online has to instantly forget about it or promise not to tell it to anybody, because it's actually embargoed. We want to make a bit of a fuss about this, quite obviously. But it is really exciting. It gives us that, you know, the Hamble over 100 years hasn't changed so much that it can't grow seagrass anymore. And we can now aim to pile more seed in and really see if we can make the Hamble part of that historic seascape that it used to be. So there we go, onwards and upwards. We have so many volunteers. We want to train leaders so that there's only 5 of us in our marine team, and we've got lots of volunteers and there's lots to do. If we have volunteer leaders, they can lead work parties as well. So we carry on with our seagrass watch surveys. Our volunteers this summer, I mentioned 180,000 seed, but this summer we went for the big push. We already have 180,000 seed in storage. So we are significantly going to be able to upscale our planting this year. More on the Hamble. Seed collection again come the summer. And we're also really interested in looking back as well. We want to restore this seascape. We want to have something that looks more like our coasts should look. And so we've also recently started a history project, because, of course, when there was so much seagrass, it was a resource, no one monitored it. And we look for anecdotal evidence in the historical record, which will tell us more about the history of seagrass in the Solent. Thank you very much.
Story. Any questions?
Thanks very much for that. I was just wondering, have you seen any evidence of your restoration areas naturally reseeding non-restored areas?
Have you seen any? Sorry,
any evidence of your restored areas providing material, seed material to naturally reseed non-restored?
Well, I mean, that patch in Farlington was actually also flowering and producing seed until the Brent geese ate it all. You know, if they'd just gone that way a bit, we could have said with confidence. What we do see working near existing seagrass meadows is some of them seem to have remained static for quite a long time, which is a bit of a curious thing. Biology doesn't tend to stand still, but in some areas where we have planted, we do see more seedlings dotted around the area in general. But this summer has been a pretty good year, possibly, so there maybe has been a bit of natural recruitment as well. So, I mean, I think with confidence yet, I mean, the Hamble evidence is the best one. We just knew there was no seagrass there. So when we see a seagrass plant, we're pretty confident planted it. In other areas, when we can see the planting pattern, we're pretty confident that that's part of the system. Other areas, there's some vagueness. But while the plant is there, it's doing what seagrass does. It's providing habitat. It's doing all those important ecosystem functions.
Hi, from memory, the Chilling Estate is an agricultural estate. So does agricultural runoff, nitrates, etc., impact on your choice of place for seed collection and regeneration?
I think what we see, I mean, obviously in the Solent, water quality and eutrophication is an issue. Agricultural runoff is probably about 70% of it. And then sewage inputs, which are much more point inputs, about 30% of it. It's relatively difficult with a big tidal area range and lots of flushing to really pinpoint areas. And agricultural runoff is pretty diffuse. Hamble, for example, huge agricultural hinterland, issues with that. And there are nice models of where you should plant seagrass. And so far, some of our biggest successes have been in the places where the model said, don't plant seagrass. So, difficult to say.
Quite. Do you have plans to do any biodiversity surveys in the areas to see if anything's changing?
Yeah, I mean, there is already biodiversity monitoring goes on, particularly as part of the Seascape project. There's a big monitoring plan across all of the 4 different types of restoration. And our MSc students, as we develop and as we start growing those persistent seagrass levels, then the projects arise instantly. But yeah, it's a big part. Yeah.
Time for one more. If not, we can move on to them. Oh, sorry, one at the back. Microphone's just in the way.
Just quickly, any indicative sort of costs?
Well, there's a journey. We haven't really encountered any negativity about restoration. If we look at history of when I joined the trust nearly 13 years ago, talking to boating groups, if you went to a yacht club and you started talking about seagrass, which at the time was a feature for proposed MCZs and things like that, quite a lot of hostility, a lot of red faces in the room, voices of reason at the bar afterwards, But nowadays, I think, and it's an ongoing process for us, that engagement and education. Nowadays, I think that there is much less opposition. In fact, in general, seagrass work and seagrass restoration seems to be pretty inspirational for a lot of different audiences, really.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. Our final speaker of the session now, Alison Leonard, is going to talk to us about the Manx BirdLife National Reserve.
Thank you very much. So apologies to those who didn't hear me do this talk before. You can start with the off numbers. Manx BirdLife, we are a small conservation organisation based on the Isle of Man, and our aim is to work towards the protection of the island's wild birds and the habitats on which we depend. We do this in a variety of ways. So surveys such as the Trust Census that we've just completed, results out soon, hopefully. Citizen science projects like the long-running Garden Bird Watch scheme, which has been running since 1999, so we've got a really wonderful data set. Our environmental education, but also land management, which is what I'm here to talk to you about. So Manx BirdLife, we have 2 nature reserves on the island. We have our newly acquired Lang Ness Reserve down in the south, but say what I'm here to talk to you about is the Manx BirdLife Point of Ayre National Reserve. It really rolls off the tongue like this. So for those of you who don't know, Point of Ayre, head north. If you hit water, you've gone too far. And there's our visitor space there. It's a very industrial space. There's a long history of mineral quarrying there, and that's how the reserve has been formed. So it's 105 acres of exhaustive mineral quarry, mainly sort of this freshwater pool with some habitats in there. The idea behind this reserve started a long time. It's over 20 years ago when a man called Chris Sharp, who at that time was surveying for the Manx Bird Atlas, wandered around and thought we could turn this into something. And it's taken us over 20 years to get to where we are. And in that time, in those 20 years, it's become more important. I mean, we're all aware that we're in a biodiversity crisis. So it's become more important that we make the most of these opportunities. So yeah, 2029, we took on basically an old mineral quarry, and to say that it was a bit of a healthy system out there is an understatement. So we embarked on this journey in partnership. So we're a small organisation. We really much can't do this on our own. So with and advocates who are our landlords and DEFA, we started this journey to try and create something. And our vision was really quite grand. Let's see, we've also opened the RSPB and TS here. See, our vision, quite grand, because why not? If you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. So what we want to create is something unique. It's a very unique landscape in terms of the Isle of Man, but we also want to create somewhere where wildlife isn't just surviving, it's thriving. We want to make sure that we are doing our bit for biodiversity, try and get those gains, but we also want to make sure it's something that people can enjoy, such as education and nature sciences. So 2019, we signed the lease for Island Aggregates. It's a 49-year lease at 105 acres. And to say that we inherited an industrial landscape is an understatement. There were huge chunks of concrete, old bits of machinery all over the place. So the main focus of the work initially was to try and create, to try and make it safe and create something. So David, our reserves manager, stepped up along with contractors and volunteers to do something. So they started clearing the rubbish, creating new features, and basically started to create a nature reserve. And so far, so good. We're quite pleased with what we've done. We've created paths, viewpoints, bird watching hide, which may come in quite handy tomorrow, depending on the weather, as well as sort of improved habitats for wildlife. And the wildlife very much has responded. We've created a native species which is secure and suitable for them, so species like gadwall, which only breeds at the point there, but also species like teal, mallards, tufted duck, oyster catchers, various species of gulls, go on and on. And in fact, we do feel that the reserve very much punches above its weight in terms of invertebrates and serious conservation concern. So 45 of the 48 red-listed species and 61 of the 68 amber-listed species have been recorded on the reserve. But we also want to try and bring back some of those species that are struggling, such as the common gull. So back in the early 2000s, when Chris was doing all those surveys for the Bird Atlas, there were 6 pairs of common gull breeding on the whole of the Isle of Man. Last year alone, we had 9 nests on the reserve, as well as extra, so on the Ayers National Reserve, which is immediately adjacent. And the common gulls are a really good example of how it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be diggers and things like that. It's a small thing can make a really big change. So for common gulls, it's a new pallet and some fence posts, which has created these nest boxes to help keep the birds up off the ground, away from growing predators while they're nesting, so at the egg and the young chick stage. And it just means that they can get, the chicks are a bit more bigger and robust by the time they've left the nest. And it's really helped with productivity. We're trying to bring back again, track some of these new species, as David mentioned. So common terns. We have good populations of Arctic and little tern, point of view. But common tern is a species that hasn't bred on the island for over 50 years. And again, one of the issues there is ground nesting. It's ground predators for ground nesting birds. So creating islands, whether it's an actual island or an artificial floating raft like these, is really important. In 2022, we put out 2 of these rafts at the reserve, complete with 3D printed decoys to help make them feel safe. And almost immediately, a Comintern came in and started to display and bring these decoys fish. Sadly, he didn't get a friend that year. He did come back in 2023, same again, same outcome. But then 2024, we had a pair of Cominterns turn up and they attempted to breed. Sadly, they were predated, but it's a small start and everything has to start somewhere. So it's all moving in the right direction. The reserve is an absolute haven for wintering birds. It's at its best in the winter when the weather isn't great for us. We have 8 species of ducks regularly recorded. Birds like these swans, who we know from the rings on their legs were born in Ramsey, ringed there and the time between the 2 sites. And it's a pit stop for migrant birds. The reserve is incredibly important for migratory species. Freshwater is quite a rare habitat on the Isle of Man, so having a really large chunk of freshwater right at the top of the island where birds are going to hit it straight away it's invaluable. And things like black-tailed godwits, wimbrel, greenshank, things like that, and also the odd avocet. And this avocet was actually our 200th bird species recorded on the reserve when it was seen in November 2023. And that means that over 2/3 of nearly 2/3 of the 300 species that are regularly seen on the Isle of Man have been recorded at the reserve. And it feels quite apt that it was, it's the poster boy for leaving conservation. But it's not just about birds. These things don't happen in isolation. We also have a great array of plants, particularly orchids, such as the bee orchid. When we started out 5 years ago, we had 21 spikes of bee orchid. Last year, we had over 600. So we're doing something right. We do also have a few species, such as the less photogenic cavernous crystal wort, and a few other rarities as well. But it is for all nature. So all of the work that we've done, so to try and create these smaller, shallower bits of water with nice wiggly edges, trying to let the vegetation regenerate naturally, has created fantastic habitats for dragonflies, butterflies, moths, things like that. And the heath bee fly, which is only recorded within the British Isles, in Dorset and at the Point of Ayre. But there's no point doing all this. It's all well and good doing this for nature, but if we don't bring people along with us, to be honest, it's a little bit pointless. So what we do also want to do is we want to create something where people can go, can learn, they can, make the most of the health benefits of being outdoors, and we can start to shape those attitudes and persuade people to make the changes that will actually matter. And how we're doing that is by just doing more of what we're doing. The reserve as it stands is 105 acres. That's that blue spot. But going forward, in the next 2 to 3 years, the red area, that's where island aggregates are currently quarrying. When that's exhausted, that will become part of the reserve as well. So that's another 120 acres. They'll move on to the green splodge, which they're just about to start quarrying soon. And when that's exhausted in 20, 25 years, again, that will become part of the reserve. So hopefully by the time I retire in 25 years' time, the whole of this area will be part of the nature reserve. And those of you who know us, we've got our eye on other bits of land as well. So it's not just this. I say we're a small organisation. We can't really do this on our own. Working in collaboration with other people is essential. So at the moment, one of our big focuses is to work with island aggregates so that when we do take on that next section of land, it comes to us in a much better condition. So talking to them about making sure that there aren't straight edges, that things are, there's that variation. It's not all deep pools and things like that, which means we can focus on the wildlife and not clearing up, which means we can then do a lot of this stuff that we'd like to do. But it is a very long-term project. I first visited the site in 2012, and I went for a walk with Chris, and at that point I remember wandering around thinking, this is brilliant, it's got really great potential. My God, there's a lot to do. Wonder who they're going to get to do that. And I still very much feel that way, and I know the team do as well. It is a very long term project. There's lots to do, and as the sign says, it is a work in progress. But it's one that we're incredibly excited to be on, and incredibly excited to share with people. And I'm really looking forward to sort of sharing it with some of you tomorrow if the weather plays well. Thank you. Do we have any questions? No, I probably lost so much.
I have one. I wanted to know how hard it was to build terns. They were the one floating ones. Was that someone?
David would be the one, the person who did it. It wasn't particularly hard to build them, was it? It's yeah.
That's what I
As with most things, it's getting things on island, or getting things to the island. There's things like the San Martin Bank that we've recently put in. Yeah, once you've got things here, volunteers, contractors, right, will really help with these things.
It takes a community to get them.
Yeah, I was interested to know what predated the terns. Was it a long tail, and what you might be able to do to prevent that in the future?
We think it was an avian predator, so probably crows. We do have a lot of gulls up there, and they do also predate a lot of our sort of the wading birds and things like that. So in terms of that, it's really hard to know what to do because our gulls are also on the red list. We can make some adjustments to the tern raft, and we'll probably do that to try and help. But the main thing, the important thing would be getting more terns, having that colony and having, letting them defend themselves. To be honest, one pair pretty much never really stood a chance, but it's positive that, it's a start.
Hi, I'm Chris from National Trust for Jersey. Just to add on to what Julie was saying, and perhaps Sam can help me as well. I believe somebody in the offshore reefs in the Channel Islands are installing 10 boxes that protect them from aerial predators. I can give you more information.
You mean like the little shelters and things like that?
Shelters for them and other species.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the other species are using. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean we've looked at those and we're just about to put in some new terns, and we're ordering not new terns, sorry, new rafts, and we're going for some of those. Yeah,
and we could do with some decoys, so we'll be asking like
pop up to Ramsey. That's where the ours came from. So.
Tim and Chris, do we have any terns we can lend?
We'll have some roseates. If you've got any of them they want to give us.
One last question. Burning desire. Oh, there's two.
In the spirit that this is all about collaboration, your relationship with Island Aggregates is really interesting because it's obviously this very long-term relationship that is beneficial for both parties. I'd be really interested how that started. How does it work practically? How did those conversations begin? And how they've been since?
So I've only been here 2 years, so I wasn't involved right at the start. As much as I visited the site, it primarily came through Chris Sharp, who started the charity and who did a lot of the work at the start, and just talking to people and trying to sort of really impress upon them the benefits there is to them for working with us, because at the moment, they're just about to submit their planning application for the next phase, and for them to be able to say, well, this is what we've done with the previous bit, it's very much in their favour. We've got a really great relationship with them. We are about to start doing sort of joint visits, so they really are trying to up their people engagement, so taking kids into the quarry, and then they can do that, show them what's happening now, but then come to us and say, look, this is what could come of it. So it's all really positive.
You sort of
kind of half answered it then. It was just, again, a very practical thing, but I was just going to ask how long it takes them to quarry those areas. So when can we expect to visit the new areas?
So they've been quarrying in the current area for the better part of 20 years. We've been told in 2 to 3 years they'll be finished. It will not be open to the public immediately for health and safety reasons because they will still need access, which actually we are fine with because it means we will have 120 acres that we can dedicate totally to nature, and we can make sure we get that right. The next phase that they're just about to submit planning permission for, I think, is 160 acres, something like that, and we're talking 20 to 25 years to quarry all of that. So it's nothing is happening quickly up there.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you again to all of our speakers. It's an inspiring session. Graham's going to give us important details about lunch.
Wow, what a roller coaster of a morning. We've heard some really quite damning data about the state of our nation. We've also heard some really good success stories. So I don't know about you all, but I'm feeling like we've had some lows and some highs, and I'm really enjoying the conversations that are obviously coming out of that. We've made it. We're at lunch. It's going to be served at the back of the room. It's as sustainable as we could get and locally sourced, so there should be some information on there about where it's come from. If you need to get out and get a bit of green space or a bit of blue space, obviously you can head out the front of the marina then, in the gardens, and then you can go through the steps and the entrance on the left there, and you can head down to the beach if you need a bit of blue space. However, after lunch, we've got a special treat for you with Bill Dale from Beach Buddies, so we might be getting outside anyway. So that's coming up. That just leaves it for me to say that the shark tagging has now been confirmed that is cancelled for the excursions tomorrow. So apologies for that. You should be aware of what your second choice excursion was, but if not, Hannah, would you mind standing up for us? We can remind ourselves who you are. Hannah at the back of the room is going to set the list up where?
Maybe just outside.
Yeah, just in the foyer, just outside here.
It will be on a board somewhere in this area.
Just outside there. And if you've changed your mind without creating too much work for Hannah, you can speak to Hannah and let her know what you'd rather do. So that leaves to say it's time for lunch. Please, can we be back here for 35 minutes past 1, 25 minutes to 2, which again will just give us time to get a little ahead of schedule. But it's all going really well so far.